Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast with me, Toby Haydoke. This one we're doing slightly differently. The story you know because you've read the blurb. It's Terror of the Autons, and it has been chosen by my special guest, Richard Marson. Back in the day, he was a writer and contributor to Doctor Who magazine. He's written books about Doctor Who, and he's also even been the editor of Blue Peter. He's Doctor Who royalty, actually, if you're a fan of my age, and he thought it would be more interesting if we chatted about his choice after we'd both watched the story. So I will watch the story without knowing what his favourite thing is, and then we'll dip forward into the future, and he'll tell me what his pick for each episode is. So we'll start, rather uncontroversially, at the beginning, with episode 1. So get yourself settled in, and we'll hear from Richard Marson, our special guest, at the end of the episode. Well, hello. I'm usually referred to as Toby Haydoke. Actually, I'm not. I'm really rarely referred to with the correct pronunciation. But that is a clue as to the episode I'm about to ask you to press play on. It is Terror of the Autons, Part 1, Episode 1. So, however you have it lined up, I hope I've bought you enough time to press play in 3, 2, 1. Well, welcome. Confession up front. This one might be a bit of a challenge for me. It's a story I've never been a massive fan of. Partially, I think it was the first Pertwee I got on bootleg video, and I was slightly disappointed to discover it was in black and white, for starters. I'd known it had only existed in black and white apart from an off-air colour, I think, but I somehow assumed that the copy I would be getting would be colour, and it wasn't. It was a very good quality black and white, but it was black and white nonetheless. So I haven't seen it in colour that much. Obviously, I have when I got the DVD, but it's not one I break out very often. The quality's okay. Actually, I sometimes expect these recoloured ones to be not so great. I think it's harder with something like the Demons, out of phase film, because we've got episode 4 and we can see the marked change in the quality between the recoloured and the actual colour. But this, it's a bit grainy, isn't it? But this is film anyway. This is John Bascombe as Rossini, who was in Poldark, the olden days one. But it's a story that I think I envisaged to be different from what we get. I always envisaged the Pertwee to be sort of lots of explosions, lots of soldiers, fewer circuses. There's quite a lot of time spent in the circus here. Fewer, factory offices. But what an entrance! And he does not disappoint. I'd always read about the Master. This is the first time I'd ever seen him, actually. Yeah. And I'd sort of got an idea of what he'd be like because I'd seen Anthony Ainley as a kid. But he is pitch perfect. And he looks fantastic. You can see why Barry Letts didn't consider anybody else for the part. Those hooded dark eyes, the way that is shot, the precise movements. The fact that he can click his fingers through leather gloves. I wonder if that was on Roger Delgado's CV. And the economy of this. That's not even a set. That's Dave Carter, perennial walk-on. He'd been Silurian in the size. He's done loads, Dave Carter. Never found him. It's hard. He's called Dave Carter. If you live next door to a bloke called Dave who says, I was in Doctor Who loads, please let me know. But the economy of that, bit of CSO, that's what that set was, a walk-on to go, oi, or whatever, smash a thing, grab the sphere. So great, the story's underway. I was trying to set up at the beginning. I know this is about accentuating the positive, but I'm just trying to explain why it will be uphill for me. I still intend to do it, and I still love Doctor Who. but I'm coming from a point where this was not the story I wanted it to be. I'd got the Target book with the amazing, one-eyed octopus crab thing on the front. I'd read about the House of Lords complaining, and the papers and the BBC upper echelon saying it was too scary, and it was, as I say, it was quite sort of garish and jolly and not what I expected. However, I'm not a potential. I think when I was younger, I wanted to be grizzled and cynical, and I liked my Doctor Who. I can understand why this is a real sort of culture shift from season 7, which was how I wanted my Doctor Who, and I can understand why the production team went away from that. Terence Dix always said that season 7, was gritty and brilliant and looked good, but it wasn't Doctor Who. It was more like Quatermass, and I like Quatermass. Whereas this is more like Doctor Who, and it's hard to disagree, actually. Although I love season 7, I could have done with another 5 years of season 7. She's great, isn't she, Katie Manning? And what we forget, I think, because she is so Jo Grant, is that in real life, I know Katie is manic and scatty and eccentric, but she's not Jo Grant. She doesn't even sound like Jo Grant. She puts on her voices, and she... this is a characterization, very much so. Maybe when we do The Curse of Peladon, I will talk about the Doctor Who and the Monsters repeat that led to me writing TH4KM on my school exercise book, because she's very easy to fall in love with. That's a nice shot through the thing. Oh, we've had it. I'm so sorry. I talked through one of the great bizarre lines of Doctor Who, which is when he calls her a ham-fisted bun vendor. For years I was going, what's a bum bender? What's a bum bender? Is it some sort of... And I've heard the third Doctor say things like jackanapes and that sort of thing. So I thought bun bender was perhaps some sort of ancient insult. But with that, I knew it wouldn't be rude. I knew it wasn't bum or in the pejorative bender, which has been used as a horrible pejorative in the past. I didn't know that was a special effect, the double, until really recently. Somebody pointed it out to me that the double radar is an effect shot. Very subtle, very effective, and this location's actually gorgeous. And these stairs and gantries give us, a feeling of height. It gives us, gets us outside in the location. That's actually gorgeous. I love that. See, I wouldn't have noticed stuff like that as a kid watching in black and white, how much that took us away from, people talking in offices, which this is, but it's slightly different. And these two are both Barry Letts regulars. Christopher Burgess has been in Enemy of the World and is in Planet of the Spiders. And Andrew Staines was actually Barry Letts' nephew, the bald guy with the beard, who was also an Enemy of the World at the last minute, taking over from... Should I do this fact now or when I do Enemy of the World? I'll do it when I do Enemy of the World. And I'm not going to do this very often, and I don't actually have much from Doctor Who. I don't have a prop from Doctor Who. I don't have a full script from... I have got the K. Patrick scripts from the Savages now. But I don't have anything that's been on screen in Doctor Who. But Andrew Staines, who's about to get killed, I had the pleasure of interviewing, and I interviewed him when he was with Terence Lodge, who he's also, because both of these guys are part of Lupton's gang in Planet of the Spiders, as is the actor Terence Lodge. And Terence introduced me to Andrew and said, "Oh, you're talking to a very fine draftsman, And Andrew said, "Oh yes, I sketched Roger Delgado learning his lines." And later, Andrew actually sent me that. So for those of you listening to the podcast, maybe I'll put this in the show notes or something. I'm showing the videocast people. This is available as videocast. The sketch, and it says, An actor prepares, this is in Andrew's handwriting, the late Roger Delgado studies his words for Terror of the Autons in the BBC rehearsal rooms, North Acton, Sept. October 1970. This was the first Doctor Who story in which he played the Master, signed Andrew Staines. And Andrew actually gave that to me. Andrew is no longer with us, so I'm very fortunate to have that, and I got it framed up, and I think it's my most treasured Doctor Who thing, just because it's a one-off, and it's a little, I know it's not a photograph, but it's a little taste of history, and it was done, when this was being made, and I think that's rather special. And Andrew was a very nice man who he pronounced it nepotism. He said he quite often filled in for Barry, because he's in Carnival of Monsters as well as the captain of the ship. He quite often filled in at the last minute if Barry was short of somebody or if somebody dropped out. His mother Pauline Letts, Barry Letts' sister, was an actress. But I really like Christopher Burgess, this actor, who's got white hair in Enemy of the World. He's sort of aged up a bit, which he wouldn't really do now, but he's got a lovely sort of broken quality about him. His voice almost feels like it's about to crack. And this is the sort of the Brigadier and the Doctor here, sort of jousting, but very good-naturedly. Doctor being rather stroppy. He's a bit of a meanie, but I mean it's deliberate. But it's rebranding, as you like, if you like the series, with this, some have said slightly cozier feel. But that's partly dictated by the rapport of the actors. Nicholas Courtney is obviously just lovely as the Brigadier, and he knows how to play the Doctor, which is nice. And yes, it is a bit less sort of Euston Filmsy gritty stuff, but Doctor Who is a show that is designed to be fun for kids, and as we know, there are various elements of this that were deemed unsuitable for kids. So perhaps a spoonful of Dayglow helps the strangulations go down. Ooh, that was torturous. I'm so sorry. And because we get Yates and Benton later, and we've got the Master, and that's it. That's the unit family, and of course you get this beautiful high shot here because you've got a big tower in your radar place. But yes, interesting. Quite a muted introduction for Yates, seeing as he's going to go on to be a regular. But I quite like it sometimes when Doctor isn't aware of its own sort of legacy and go, this is a big moment. I know Captain Yates, but he's a regular. He's a companion. Or is he? I don't know. Yeah, he is. He's a regular. Frank Mills, still about, 93. Lives not far from here, I think. I remember he's one of those actors that you look at and think, I know him from somewhere. He's been in everything, but actually had a sort of better later career. I think he's an extra in Quatermass and the Pit. But was Betty Turpin's husband in Coronation Street, and I know he auditioned for the Forsyte Saga, the remake, on the day that I did, because they were seeing the Manchester actors, and Jeff Hinsliff was up for the same part as Frank Mills, I think. Not the part I was up for. I got it. I don't think either of them did, but they were seeing all the Manchester actors in one day, because that's what happens. They do 3 weeks of auditions in London, then go, let's throw a bone to the Manchester people. We could spare them 12 hours. I adore David Garth, Solicitor Grey from the Highlanders, returning to Doctor Who as the bowler-hatted Time Lord. This is Robert Holmes already going, berobed, invincible, godlike people. Nah, nuts to that. I'll make him a slightly fruity, patronising city gent. David Garth is perfectly cast and plays the part to a T. I can understand why, fans at the time maybe who'd seen the Time Lords once, they were big news. The Doctor is from the Time Lords, and they're these amazing, scary, godlike people in robes with starry eyes who could create force fields. And a year and a bit later, no, they're pompous civil servants. But I like what Robert Holmes does with Doctor Who. He makes it slightly more than science fiction. And austere and berobed can only take you a certain way, and I think what sums up Doctor Who is that actually, where a lot of programs would make people austere and berobed, Doctor Who makes them bowler hatted, and that is sort of comforting, yet also satirical, yet also a cheeky Mickey take. Much more fun for the actor. Good umbrella acting there, David Garth. And I think that's what makes it Doctor Who. So whilst I'm sure if I'd been a kid of 7 or 8 in 1969 when the War Games was on and I watched this, I would be furious. We Doctor Who fans do furious, especially when the programme with the flexible format flexes its format. But I love this now. And I think this is a terrific scene, and the fact that Pertwee is so good at being pissed off. Oh, good wind as well, I have to say, because this is a set, obviously. Oh, good luck. I think that's terrific. And that's a sort of, that's a parallel of the Pertwee Doctor bumping heads with civil servants on Earth, which he will do for the rest of his career, pretty much. In fact, we get one in episode 3 here. So in a way, that's a neat foreshadowing of what he's going to have to do. And we're getting the Doctor to use his skills fairly early on, which is nice. He's a natural Pertwee. I think he fits the part like a glove and does all this stuff like it's second nature, which for somebody who was unsure of himself, I know there was a feeling he was slightly intimidated by Roger Delgado, wasn't he? Because Delgado had much more experience as a television actor and as a straight actor. Pertwee hadn't really done an awful lot of electronic studio drama acting before he was Doctor Who, if any. And I think, was not as confident as he might have appeared. So it's to his credit that he is a Doctor of extreme confidence, who just looks brilliant. But yeah, Frank Mills, here he is. I remember seeing him turn up in sort of Casualty and things sort of much after I'd even sort of been collecting this. I was surprised he was sort of still about and still doing stuff. But he started acting, I think, quite late. But yep, still going at 93, somewhere around here. His part in Coronation Street was slightly odd because he was sort of introduced to marry Betty Turpin, but then he was sort of more of a sort of off-screen. And this shot of Andrew Staines took ages and is really well done, and it's a great way of establishing the Master. It's good, it is. And the shadow there is good because it wouldn't look so realistic without the shadow. I think the shadow was done with a cardboard cutout. But that shot took a couple of hours. That's it, so in its infancy. But I think it's terrific and much better than a doll that they used subsequently. But obviously it doesn't take as long. And I think that's a great Doctor Who moment. So we're doing all right so far, aren't we, for a story that I was going to be slightly underwhelmed by. It's also slightly different, this, because I'm going to have to choose my things as we go through, but I'm then not going to know what the person that sent me this story, Richard Marson, has done until tomorrow in my time, because we're going to do it on Zoom. So I'm going to write down what I choose for each episode as my favourite thing so that I don't cheat, and then we'll see whether Richard and I have come up with the same things. I'm not used to this in colour at all. I watched this in black and white so many times. I think I've probably seen it in colour once, maybe twice. That's not very often for me for a Doctor Who story. I didn't say I passed. Very nice. I do like the fact the Doctor's got a space apron. Silver was a good shorthand for space, wasn't it? I think I'm sure there are even some silver cushions on Gallifrey at some point. How do we make this ordinary thing look like it is from space or the future? Silver, we don't have that these days. but yeah, the this I think I expected Pertwee Doctor Who to look much more like a movie, just because of the way it was written up. I think I expected it to be darker. All of these inventive deaths in this are actually quite comic strippy, and I don't mean that as a pejorative, but I think my taste, as I say, my taste as a youngster was always for Doctor Who to be as grown up as possible, which is interesting because as I get older, and I have a couple of kids now who are in teens. Well, now one is 20, and I was desperate for them to retain their childhoods for as long as possible, because actually being as kid, and I struggled in my childhood a lot, for various reasons I'm not going to bore you with, but also there was all that unfettered joy and innocence and all of those things that we do lose and that get eroded over time. And I was desperate for my kids sometimes when they wanted to be all grown up to sort of enjoy being a kid for as long as possible, because in many ways it doesn't get better than that. And I think I spent a lot of my childhood because I've got older brothers and sisters, waiting for that time when life got sorted, when you got grown up and you knew everything and you didn't have to worry about anything. And of course, none of that's true. So actually I connect a lot more with Doctor Who that's a bit more kid-friendly now, I think, because it reminds me that of those things that I think sometimes as a kid you don't realise are the best days of your life in many ways. I always like Doctor Who when it goes on location, just little things like those rows of pipes and the size of the set, as it were, because we're outside. Benefits from being on location, and this is great. Joe Grant, Kate, oh hello, and he's got such a good face. And I remember reading an interview with Katie Manning where she said she had to be hypnotised by the Master, and when he was off camera he pulled lots of faces at her to make her giggle. Although it must be this bit, because it was too far away from her before, because she can't see a blooming thing. Ha 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 ha! Because Katie Manning is as blind as a bat. And Michael Wisher, who I mates with Barry Letts. Michael Wisher, the first Davros, but he'd been in Ambassadors of Death 2 stories ago with a beard. So I suppose shave your beard off, you can have another part 2 stories later. Those were the days. And Benton. So now we have the 5 regulars. The unit family is in place. Harry Taub. Both of his Doctor Who appearances, because he was a very recognisable actor, Harry Taub, and also an Irishman, fanzine, what I read many years ago, that said he'd got a terrible Irish accent. And I was very heartened when Harry Taub passed away. I think The Independent or The Guardian called him one of the finest character actors of his generation, something like that. And it was nice to see him get that sort of recognition, because very good character actor, great career on stage and on screen. And yet his Doctor Who's are both sort of, let's get the famous guy in and then kill him off, surprisingly, because he's in episode 1 of The Seeds of Death. And he gets a guest billing in the Radio Times, and he's dead within about 10 minutes. And I mean, at least he makes it to episode 2 here, and he's in the tribute to Roger Delgado as well on the is it the Frontier in Space DVD, and wrote a lovely letter, I know, to the guys involved in the making of the DVD, just saying thanks for the DVD and stuff like that. So proper gent. And this is the bit where he does the phone call and wraps his and you've got his tapping finger. I really like this touch. Barry Letts isn't the most dynamic of directors, I don't think. But I love that moment. I think that's it's just a way of just making it a bit more interesting. Now, yes, we needed to see an Auton, because it is called Terror of the Autons. And I think one of the things I felt as a kid was that I didn't see enough of them. They do like their CSO backdrops, don't they? Which is, they're learning how to, they're breaking in the technology, and being 100% convincing wasn't necessarily the order of the day. I think there was a tacit acknowledgement that you were suggesting something rather than entirely pulling it off. You can always see the fringing on the CSO, but the CSO sort of blow up backdrop walls didn't last that long. Stopper That's a Bomb, I think, had to be added a bit later because it's not entirely clear what the smoking box is. But there we go. I'm perfectly happy with that. I'm pleased to. I remember being astonished and rather chuffed that Delgado's so high up on the credits. I mean, he really is a regular. He's not, not just the good guys, then the bad guys. I was quite surprised to see Katie Manning so low down. She goes further up as the era progresses, and the Brigadier and Yates and Benton drop right to the bottom. Right to the bottom. Anyway, you don't care about that. It's only me who gives some monkeys about credit order. I've done a whole podcast on that. Anyway, I've got to choose my favourite thing because I'm about to leap in. No director credit on this, is there? Because it's Barry Letts is the producer and the director. So that's the end of episode 1. I'm going to pause it. Ready to watch episode 2, which I am going to do shortly. It'll be another episode for you. However, normally now I would play what my special guest has chosen as their favourite thing. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to nominate mine. I'm going to write it on this piece of paper so I cannot cheat. And then when I speak to them for me tomorrow, but I'll play for you imminently, they'll tell me what their favourite thing is, and we'll see if what I've written down matches with them. And if it does, I win, and if it doesn't, I lose. And the difference between winning and losing is not entirely clear. But let's add some drama to it. I am going to choose, I think it's pretty, with honourable mention to that brilliant CSO shot of Googe, which obviously has a slight personal connection for me. I think because it sums up to me so much of what Doctor Who is about, because it probably would have annoyed me if I'd been a fan at the day, and yet I have to accept that I think it's really great now. And it never did annoy me, but that's because I'm younger. But I'm sure there are similar things that have happened that sort of upended my view of what Doctor Who was because of the way the show evolves, that I've been furious about. So I don't distance myself from anybody that was annoyed with it, because I'm cut from the same cloth. However, I love it. I think it's very Robert Holmes. I think it's very Doctor Who, and that is the bowler-hatted Time Lord. Not just the performance from David Garth, which I think is very good, because I have to be careful not to just go, I like that actor and that performance, because they're very much the things that I fixate upon. It's the whole concept of what he's done with the Time Lord there, the whole interaction with the Doctor, as well as the performance. So the bowler-hatted Time Lord is my favourite thing for episode 1. I'm now going to cut to the future, where I will talk to Richard Marson and see what he says. Well, I had a brainwave in that I thought I'd contact for this, not just people that I sit in the pub with and wax lyrical about Doctor Who to, but the very people that created the monster you see before you now, the people that wrote the history that I gorged on as a child. So I'm delighted. I have met this gentleman before and had a very nice time when I've done so, but we don't talk that often, although always very helpful when it comes to sharing resources or making contacts, which is a really important part of the stuff that we do, and is, I think, sometimes underreported. So I'm very grateful to Richard Marson for a number of reasons. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hello, Toby. I'm really good, thank you. In these strange times, I have not many complaints. So there you go.
And tell me why I would just for the viewer, because some of them, we've got some very young ones, I think. I don't know, I haven't launched the podcast yet, but just so that it comes from your mouth, your sort of history with Doctor Who.
So many years ago, when I was only a teenager, I had the great good fortune to start writing for Doctor Who magazine, Doctor Who Monthly, as it was then. So it had a crummy office in Queensway, and was very much a labour of love for the people who did it. And incredibly, I kind of blagged my way in. And for 4 years, while I was also in full-time education, I was writing articles, doing interviews. And I think what often gets forgotten is that was the pre-internet era. So in terms of finding out stuff and doing any kind of research, it was much harder work. But the great advantage we did have was that, of course, most of those people from the classic era of Doctor Who were still alive, and they might be very surprised that you wanted to talk to them, but they were still working. They were still, in some cases, in their prime. So that was an enormous privilege, you know. And I look back now and I think, oh, I wish I'd done more. I wish I'd, you know, kind of tracked even more people down. But it was an incredible time. And from there, you know, I then worked in television and never lost my love of Doctor Who. But while I was on Blue Peter, I was running Blue Peter for a number of years, at the point where Doctor Who came back spectacularly and very successfully. And it was great to be part of doing the promotion. So we did the famous designer monster competition. Whatever you think of Love and Monsters,
I love
that
Love and
is
Monsters.
also a same here. And it's a tribute to the kind of sibling relationship between Doctor Who and Blue Peter, which was lovely to be able to continue to foster that and continue to develop that. And I've also written a couple of Doctor Who related books. One was the biography of John Nathan Turner, which caused a bit of a hoo-ha a few years ago. Happily, I think Perspective has now allowed to be in the building, along with Hoo-Ha. And then I did a biography of Verity Lambert, which was really, you know, a kind of fascinating, because I knew much less about Verity. And of course, she had an incredible varied career. So that really was a fascinating process. So those are my credentials. And
I like it. And
that's why I'm here. But of course,
I want you
I was just going to say,
Oh.
like you, Toby, I was that kind of, I remember listening to your initial show when it was on Radio 4 and just kind of nodding like a nodding dog. I think I was in the car going somewhere and just thinking there was so much kind of empathy for the things you were describing. And the thing that, you know, when you're a first Doctor Who fan, again in the pre-internet era, we were slightly other in that most of our families and friends didn't really get in any way why we loved this program. And so you had to seek out the people who got where you were coming from and understood why it had somehow managed to root itself in your heart. So there you are.
Oh, well, bless you. Well, and I would like you to write a history of Doctor Who, actually, called Perspective and Hoo-Ha, because I think I think that's pretty much Doctor Who fandom in a nutshell, isn't it? Perspective and Hoo-Ha. Well, look, you have chosen a story. I've chosen one thing from each episode and a bonus thing that I like about it, and I'm going to see if we tally. But the viewer does not yet know which story you've chosen. So without going into specifics, tell us the story that you've chosen and a sort of vague reason why.
Okay, I've gone for Terror of the Autons, the first story of the 1971 season of Doctor Who. And the reason for that is it's really my first memory of the programme. And the reason it took root in my memory, I think, was it terrified me so completely. I mean, I couldn't tear myself away, but equally I was really genuinely freaked out by it, and those memories, which were very visceral, stayed with me, you know, ever afterwards. And it was also the beginning of my kind of personal dream team of Doctor Who: John Pertwee, Katie Manning, and the kind of unit guys. So for me, it's the beginning of a lot of things.
Lovely. Well, episode 1. Now, listen, I have a confession to make. This was a tricky one for me because it was the first Pertwee I sort of collected on bootleg, and having had my imagination fired up by the Target books and the movies they created in our heads, and the fact that it was in black and white, it was a massive disappointment to me. And it took me ages to recover from that. So this has been a very useful process. To sort of go into it with fresh eyes, and I did thoroughly enjoy it. I'm pleased to say, but I had to get that confession out of the way, and I've chosen my thing for episode 1. But I'll be interested, and I've written it down so that I can't cheat. But so what's your choice for episode 1, Richard?
Well, I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but for me, it's the first meeting of Katie Manning's Joe Grant with the Doctor when she comes in and ruins his experiment by using the fire extinguisher. I think, partly it's because of the charm of it, that I think it's very tough for a young actor to join any series. And obviously, Katie Manning was, I guess, in her early 20s. And, to make such impact straight away, to be someone who has so much immediate effect on the viewer, I think that's no mean feat. She doesn't always get the credit for it. And, John Pertwee was clearly an established scene stealer and very domineering leading man. So she needed to be able to quickly carve out her own niche and her own place in the proceedings, which she does with so much charm right from the off. And so that's why I thought, for me, that was the moment.
I think that's a good choice. And I think Katie, and I did mention it in my commentary, I think we sometimes forget as well that Katie is acting, because Joe is such a great creation, and because Katie is bonkers in the best sense. We sort of go, oh, well, they're sort of the same, but actually they're not. And even their vocal register is totally different. It's a proper acting performance. But I think I'm always in danger, I think, of when I'm doing this, of overlooking the regulars. So I thought you were going to also say perhaps the arrival of the Master, which is another great scene. But I've gone I've ignored the regulars, which I must make a mental note not to do, although it would be boring if every time I just went Patrick Troughton, whatever. But I chose the bowler-hatted Time Lords. I don't know if you see the mirror or whether I'm the right way around. Just because, but interesting. Part of that choice, I added the caveat, and you will be able to give proper perspective on this, that if you've just been introduced to the Time Lords in the War Games as the Doctor's people, and they're these austere, good, godlike figures, was there not a certain amount of sort of disappointment that the next time you see them, that majesty has been completely sort of undercut and satirized by pesky Robert Holmes?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Toby, because I always think that moment's a bit shonky. And I don't know that I truly can say that I thought that at the age of 5 when I first saw it, because I think my 5-year-old impression of Terror of the Autons is of lurid colour and visceral horror. So I think it was more a kind of gut reaction to the images. And actually, even now, for something that's nearly 50 years old, I think it moves along at quite a rattle if you compare it to other things at that time. It's very, very comic strip in a lot of ways, which if you're 5, actually works really well, because you're not analysing the plot, you're not overthinking it, you're just swept up in this kind of tidal wave of one set piece after another, and your safety valve are the Doctor and Joe and the Brigadier, and they work really well. So I think the shonky Time Lord cropping up on the dodgy CSO probably went like that. And when I watch it now, I do think this is a little bit of an in joke going on somewhere with Barry Letson and maybe an actor mate. I don't know if it was an actor mate of his, but that's how it feels now as an adult.
So in effect, I've managed to choose the one thing you really don't like about it. This could be interesting. So, okie dokie. I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find. Well, more of a clarification, really, because I got distracted and sidetracked when discussing the Doctor's insult to Joe after she has ruined his experiment. And yes, I know he wasn't calling her a bum bender, although that's quite the playground insult. I do discuss this during the next episode where I pick up the thread, but I didn't want to leave it hanging lest I get a barrage of Twitter I think you'll find. I know the line is, "You ham-fisted bun vendor," which basically means you cack-handed seller of cakes, which is, as insults go, I suspect verging into the realms of the unique. But what a line to conjure. You ham-fisted bun vendor. More on that next week, but just some clarification that I do know what the actual line is. Richard's good, isn't he? There's more from him next time. Okay, so that was Richard Marson. As I record this, I've got no idea what we've just said to each other, because that's happening tomorrow. But I'm going to wibbly wobbly off into time and space, and I hope that whatever Richard and I did was suitably climactic and satisfying. I am going to soon watch episode 2, which will be the next episode of this, but for this particular installment, stop me, that's a bomb. That's a wrap. Thanks very much. Ta-ta. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Richard Marson. And every episode, it's a great pleasure for me to give a shout out to some people who've kindly become patrons at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. This episode, I'm going to mention Quarridors, Thomas Payne, Ken Patterson, Russell Parker, Nick Mellish, Pip Madeley, Sean McAllister, Nate Lynch, Hendrik Korzeniowski, Andy Kitching, Jeff Kaplan, Judith Jackson, Christopher Joyce, Gregory Hudson, Darren Howard, and Matthew Hooliston. And thanks too to those who've decided to donate at kofi.com/Toby Haydock, who include Tony Cross, John Ball, Scott, and New to Who podcast. I'm very grateful. The music for this podcast is specially composed by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork is by Dylan Patterson. If you can, I'd be very grateful if you could rate positively and review positively these podcasts at any outlet you possibly can. And you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, where there is a video version of each episode of this audio podcast available, so you can, see what I'm wearing or not. I'm always wearing something. Every Tuesday I have special guests at my comedy club, Excess Malarkey, which has been running for 24 years and is currently being zoomed on Twitch TV. So it's twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey every Tuesday at 8 p.m.